And so I was recently in a conversation with someone who believed that the process of kundalini was always necessarily painful, difficult and challenging. That everyone going through the process that kundalini is would always experience pain in various degrees, challenges in various degrees, and various kinds of um, difficult emotional states and so on. Now, this actually isn't the case. Okay, I would actually say that most people going through the kundalini process have an easy time of it. Yeah, it's an easy process. Quite often it goes unnoticed. Yeah, when kundalini arises in a body that's already well prepared, it's quite an unnoticeable event. We might experience some of the chakras opening, we might experience some energy channels being purified, and then it's just a gradual dissolution into pure bliss consciousness. Okay, but difficulties that some people have are caused by various things. They're caused by kundalini awakening too soon, so a premature kundalini awakening, or if kundalini awakens at the right time, it's caused by the process happening too quickly, or it's caused by kundalini awakening into the wrong channel. Okay, so basically if people experience difficulties, then something is wrong. It's a rare situation. Most people don't experience energetic problems, and it's usually caused by kundalini awakening prematurely, or into the wrong channel, or progressing too fast through the body. Now, it is actually quite common these days for people to believe that kundalini is always problematic. And I've actually watched this process happen over the last 40 years or so. So 40 years ago I was 16 years old, and I started to get interested in spiritual practices. And I was very lucky, we had a local spiritual bookshop, and I would frequent that. There wasn't a lot on kundalini. I think there were only about 2 or 3 books. If I remember rightly, The Serpent Power by John Woodcroft, that might be his name, that had been published. And there was another book published by a man called Gopi Krishna. And Gopi Krishna had basically been through a kind of kundalini nightmare. He'd awakened his kundalini prematurely by using very intense crown chakra practices, and he sort of went through 20 years of hell. Almost died several times, I think, and eventually came through it and went on to the higher stages of liberation. And then I started going through the process of kundalini myself several years later, I think when I was about 19 or 20 years old. Now, not soon after, the internet arrived. It arrived gradually. People had dial-up connections and via a phone line in their house. And when the internet started, there were chat forums. And chat forums also included spiritual chat forums. And people would start sharing stories about kundalini. But all the stories that were shared were stories about how difficult it was, how painful it was, how challenging it was, how unbearable it was. And I thought this was odd because I was going through my own kundalini awakening. It wasn't any of these things. It was quite beautiful, quite interesting, quite ecstatic, and so on. And I started to realize that the way the internet worked was things that are problematic, difficult horror stories got pushed to the forefront of various algorithms, more people would see them. Stories that were just, I'm living my life and it's beautiful and everything's fine, they didn't get pushed to the front of algorithms. They didn't get seen by the same number of people. So the actual way that the internet was being created was working to amplify these kundalini disaster stories, what some people call kundalini emergency situations today. So it was creating a very distorted picture. And then over the years, I ended up practicing with many hundreds of people, possibly even many thousands of people, and started to realize that for most people, the process of kundalini is actually quite easy, quite beautiful. At a certain point becomes ecstatic, the whole body becomes ecstatic, and the whole body becomes radiant. So it's not surprising to me that there are many people in the world who believe that kundalini is always difficult, painful and problematic, but that's not the case. That's not the reality of the situation. And in fact, even for people who are going through a challenging and difficult kundalini experience, there are many ways that the whole process can be grounded, can be slowed down, and can be stabilized. And if people do this, then they bring their whole process to a stable level of functioning, and then it becomes a very beautiful experience. So we've actually reached the point today where no one needs to be going through a difficult, painful or challenging kundalini experience. Everybody can use the techniques that are available to ground themselves, to stabilize themselves, to slow the process down so that it becomes manageable and then enjoyable. And the most important things that we can do before a kundalini awakening are practicing meditation to bring the mind to silence, cultivate equanimity, peacefulness and inner silence, and then also practicing pranayama to purify the central channel in the body, the Sushumna Nadi, so that kundalini has a safe pathway to awaken through. And then even after the awakening of kundalini, the same practices are important for the same reasons. Meditation to establish inner silence, pranayama to keep the energy moving up through the central channel. So we have the technology now to manage kundalini in a safe way for everyone. But it is important to be aware that if you are going through a difficult or painful or challenging kundalini awakening, then that's not normal. Okay, that's a rare experience, and there are many ways of stabilizing what you're going through and eliminating any of the painful or challenging aspects. And someone did say to me, what about the dissolution of the ego? Surely that's an aspect of kundalini, and surely that's going to be challenging for everyone. So that's also not the case. That's also not the case. If we're cultivating inner silence, if we're cultivating samadhi, if we're purifying the energy channels, then the dissolution of the ego is almost a non-event. It's almost a non-event. All that happens is that we stop identifying with the body and the mind, and we come to know ourselves as pure bliss consciousness. Okay, and there doesn't need to be anything challenging or difficult about that.